Howdy. Thanks for coming. John, Randy, Octavio, I see you're here. I don't know. You want to be featured? You want to get up there? No? All right.
I got to jump in 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I got a
Sounds
call.
good. Well, thanks for coming out. We got our guest speaker portion of the afternoon, which is more LA entrepreneur superstars as usual. Randy with class of 98, like me at Harvey Mudd. However, we did not know each other, even though there was 100 people in our class. I don't know. We met maybe 6 years ago now or something at a HMC EN event. I was like, no, you weren't class of 98. And then I met Jonathan Zweig through him. They were business partners successfully and friends for a long time. And John Bradford, I met, I think, through just being next to you at a co-working place. Is that how we originally met? Or no, it was next to Start Engine.
Yeah.
And that's
Like
how
that.
I think via
Yeah,
Start Engine,
yeah.
but that's been like
Long time.
7 or 8 years now. I don't know. It's pretty time semi flies.
It does.
Yeah. Anyway, all these guys are super entrepreneurs, multiple serial entrepreneurs, and totally self-made and also good at marketing, branding, selling, all that stuff. So I thought they'd be good guests for today. Why don't we first just go around? I guess I'll start with Randy and give the 2 or 3 minutes about how you got from college to where you are today, please.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. Well, I graduated 98. 98 was, for the kids who don't remember, was the peak of the .com, or approaching the peak of the .com. So Professor Evans was getting all the students real pumped up about starting companies, and I was one of those students. Wanted to start a company, didn't know how, of course. Graduated, took a job in engineering. Worked there for about 6 months, quit that job, went to law school, during law school, I started a company with Octavio and a couple other guys from my previous engineering job, doing anti-piracy software. Now, by that point, it was 2000, the .com bubble had burst. There was no venture funding. It was probably the worst time to raise venture funding in the last 30 years. So we basically had to bootstrap it. Luckily, we had a kind of an interesting product. Pretty passionate about sales, actually, in the sense that had to learn it from scratch. Not to go too far off down the road, but a lot of our sales were directly to big music and movie studios, which were extremely complex, long sales. And Octavio and I basically did it all ourselves. Worked that off. Sold that company in 2005. Worked off employment contract. John was actually my roommate, best friend. We were talking about technology all the time. He was playing around with the early iPhone and some JavaScript iPhone games. And so I'll let him tell that story, because there's a lot of overlap there. And currently I'm working on an independent game studio called Lucid Sight. And we have a mid-core space MMO called CSC.
You're muted, Josh.
It's all part of my brand. Just listen. I'm a good listener. Jonathan Zweig, why don't you follow up there from Randy?
Sure. Yeah, and I kind of want to just dispel the notion, at least for me, that I'm self-made, because I think like the biggest thing that I've learned over the last 15 years is none of us really are. And to be successful, it's all about, I'd say, 2 things, but one is persistence, and maybe we could talk more about that. But I think the second thing is just finding people who are ahead of you in the journey and just spending a lot of time with them and just listening. And that was my lucky break. I happened to be Randy's roommate, happened to be his best friend. But what I did was every day when he would come home from work, I'd bother the hell out of him and spend 4 hours with him, just asking questions upon questions. And so, I think 8 years later, he kicked me out. So, but I think like my story is one of, just being, at the right place in the right time. Randy had just sold his company. I was his roommate. and the iPhone had just come out and there was no app store. And so we started thinking, man, like, why isn't there a brick breaker or something? So we were making, very, very basic Safari games for the Safari browser before the App Store came out. Apple took notice and gave us a key to the App Store before basically anybody else. There were only about 12 or 13 companies, and we had 14 of the first 100 games on the App Store. So that was our kind of lucky break when it came to the App Store, and we eventually pivoted that games business into the one of the world's largest video ad networks, and called Ad Colony. But I think for me, it was just spending a lot of time listening to others who were much farther ahead of me in the journey. And then the great thing about technology is there's always new waves. There's a new wave, right now, and then there'll be new waves in the coming years. But it's all about timing and persistence and listening to others.
Speaking of listening to others, John, Bradford, what's your story?
Yeah, I agree with everything that John just said there. But I moved out to LA in 2000 college in pursuit of my first real technical venture. Had done some less technical stuff when I was in school. Came out here, I had no idea what I was going to do. Was fortunate enough to sell my first company to a subsidiary of GoDaddy like 7 months later, which was an opportunity in the domaining space. And after that, spent the next couple months arguing with my partner about what we should do next, until finally I suggested that we start a business that solved that problem for us, just knowing that as entrepreneurs, there'd be ups and downs inevitably, and another in between. So, that being said, incubator model was kind of the most obvious to us in terms of how we could responsibly work on more than one venture at a time. But I was 23 at that point. He was 21. Didn't think people would take us very seriously as just being, angel investors, and frankly, didn't have that much money yet either. So instead, we decided to start building out product in exchange for equity, and have been very pleased with that decision. We've done about 80 ventures now. We've had 9 exits, a couple in the 9-digit category, so that's been great. And just always looking for the right person to start the right thing. So that's kind of the hunt. I too very much believe that you can't do it on your own. And our primary investment thesis, the way I think about it, is, why is this person that's coming to me, it says that they need my resources, able to execute on this business idea better than if I were to just do it myself? So,
yeah, the why them. But wait, you skipped your part in college. What was your venture in college, real quick?
So I used to sell birthday cakes and deliver them to kids while they were away at school, and expanded that to 25 campuses around the United States, all 10 of the Big 10 schools, and sold that company to seed us to move out to LA and do the tech thing. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
What was your other company in college?
The concerts? Is that what
the other one? Anyway, I'm just trying.
Curtains?
Yeah, no, curtains. I wanted to hear about the curtains.
Curtains. Okay, yeah. So my first 6 weeks of college, I was super hungover, and waking up at 8 a.m. as the sun came up, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So I went out and got blackout curtains, and go figure, I could sleep till noon. Had some friends notice that and thought that was a pretty good idea. So my first real risk with my money was I ordered 3,000 blackout curtains and print them, because I was at Indiana University, and went door to door selling curtains. University meant to change any of the environment. So I stopped at that point, but it was good. It was definitely a positive. There's never a better time to experiment and play as an entrepreneur. And definitely very formidable. A lot different in terms of how I think about starting businesses now, but did a lot of different things.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I love. Just that you got sales experience there. You just launched it. Didn't worry too much about developing the perfect curtain business.
Yeah. Yeah.
all that.
Put it out there. Yeah.
Found a problem, solved it.
Yeah.
All right. So what are you guys? Let's see. We can first of all, anytime anyone wants to put any Q&A in the chat, it's good. I just want to brag about these guys like Randy and Jonathan Zweig. I mean, Randy's first company, Media Defender, was it 8-figure exit? The next one, Ad Colony, them together, 9-figure exit. John, like Pluto TV was one of your collab companies, right? I don't know if that's the biggest one, but you might see billboards for that around. These guys, have done well. So what? Maybe I don't know. I guess we'll just get into some. What do you think the key from a sort of a sales, like how do you get that confidence that you're doing something right, or that you're, I don't know, just put yourself out there and launching? And
well, the thing about a lot of I think a lot when you see a lot of sales and marketing talk is marketing kind of gets the golden star, and sales is sort of the stepchild. But at the stage, I think most of the entrepreneurs I've talked to in this audience said it should be the other way around. The sales should come first, because most of the time, unless you have just an absolute fantastic product like a Google search bar, right? I mean, then it sells itself. Most of the time, if you can't directly sell something, you're going to have a hard time marketing. And the reality about sales and product is it's kind of like, where does your arm end and your body start? They go together so tightly, and you will learn so much. So I've talked to so far, doing the office hours stuff, so many entrepreneurs that actually have products, as Josh has kind of said, and they're like trying to figure out how to market it. And my biggest advice to them is, you guys got to just sell it one at a time. Like go find people who will give you some dollar amount for your product, just to kind of get that flow of funds. Because it's easy to sell Coke, it's easy to sell and market products that are so like well-defined and loved. But you take a product like Coke, it started with cocaine in it, 100 years ago, right? It was a completely different product. And the fact that Coke is like so good at branding, that's not really that useful at your guys' stage, because Coke is a fantastic product. So I think on that front, what it comes down to is a lot of engineers are really, really bad at sales. Because one, it's not taught in schools. You don't take a sales class. You might be able to take a marketing class, but even CMC and Pomona aren't going to have sales classes. You're going to have to kind of learn it on your own. And I actually like to look at sales people, like books and stuff and things written, not necessarily from tech people, because a lot of that comes down to people who are very like, they just have like fantastic products, or they just kind of caught a wave. I actually like the founder of Sam Adams, Jim Koch. I think I'm saying his name right. He writes a lot of really interesting stuff. No, I don't think he's ever written a book, but you can kind of go Google some of those things he writes, and how he would sell his beer door to door, and how he's like a Harvard Business School guy. And, obviously Sam Adams is a big household brand, very well branded. And he talked about how he would go to, after he had his MBA from Harvard, how he didn't know anything about sales. He had to go to bar selling his beer, and he learned so much about the process of bars buying beer. So I would encourage everybody to, kind of get, especially the engineers in the group, to kind of get into a sales mindset where you're, especially if you're the CEO, it's like your company, you're going to have to make that first sale. Most likely, you're not going to hire a sales guy out the gate or salesperson out the gate who's going to just solve your problem for you. So that would be my kind of take on it. Is sales and product are super tightly intertwined at the nascent stage.
Yeah, as the CEO of my company, I would say 85% of my job is sales. And, I'm fortunate enough where my job is to work on other people's companies. So oftentimes that implies I'm sometimes doing sales on behalf of that product as opposed to just my own company. But like the sign of success, is it working, is money in the bank. If people are willing to pay and it's more than it costs, then that is a good sign. And I agree, just going door to door, calling people, asking them if they'd sign up for this, would they pay for it, how much they pay for it, etc. And doing that before even thinking about writing any code is really an important, first step, whether that be an expert in your network or the appropriate kind of qualified user that you would be targeting. You can easily, post something on Craigslist and get a reply.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I forgot, like DreamHost, we were pretty much, B2C and hundreds of thousands of users, but like our first our first 3 customers were doing website design. It was like consulting and it was sales, and we didn't even think we were going to do web hosting, or we didn't know what we were going to do, but it was from these actual one-on-one relationships that they're like, well, I need to host my website. And we're like, okay. And then probably the first 30 customers were all sales, really, like friends or friends of friends. And
Exactly. And I also think it's super important to acknowledge that sales is hard and emotional, and rejection sucks. It's a very, very, and I think this is one of the reasons why engineering technical-minded people, including myself, struggle with it and have to kind of get over it. Somebody told me a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, do the things that failures hate to do. And it's one of these, cliche sayings and, whatever, it's not going to be taught in a class, but sometimes you have to really psych yourself up to make that phone call, especially if your odds are long and rejection is likely and you've faced a lot of rejection. You have to learn to kind of embrace it. Some people naturally are better at dealing with, there's extroverts, introverts, and all that. Actually, say additional process. Which again, if it was just a series of steps, engineers would rock sales all the time. If it was just like do this, then this, then this, then this, engineers would be the best salespeople in the world. And again, I'm an Harvey Mudd engineering major, so I'm speaking from experience that you have to remember. People remember from your phone calls how they feel much more than the content of the phone call. So you want to leave people feeling good. Part of that is your energy, right? So it's not just, I have a series of facts that you will like. Fact, 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 fact. It is a series of taking people on an emotional journey and drawing them in, not wasting their time, not boring them. Stand up and walk around when you're making honestly, you got 10 minutes to make that pitch. Stand up. Don't be sitting in your chair. Get some energy going. These are all very, very subtle things that I think they'll never be taught in a class, but they're super important.
they just did.
Yeah, except for Josh's class.
Not really a class, sort of a class. Yeah, I think how about fundraising? How does that fit in with brand and sales? What do you think about that? Jay-Z?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's the same skill set. You'll be exhausted after like 3 straight meetings and you'll wonder why, because it's like Randy said, it takes a lot of energy. Each call, even if it's a 10-minute call, is like doing a sprint. I mean, it requires that much energy. You gotta get up. Motion creates emotion. All these things. No professor is gonna tell you, that these are the steps, to a great sale. It's a lot of it has to do with energy, your enthusiasm, and those things. But yeah, raising money is the same as getting a customer. It's all those things. It requires your whole being. You have to believe it first. So I think, if you don't believe in your company, you can't expect anybody else to. One practical piece of advice that I actually haven't tried yet, but I was reading recently that's kind of Randy talked about kind of the nascent stages of maybe some of your companies or some of your ideas, but there was an article recently that talked about basically you shouldn't launch a new product without first creating a wait list. That way, you could spend $500 creating a landing page and then $500 on some Instagram ads or whatever, just to even validate if people will sign up for it before you even build the product. That'll save you. Once you start building the product, you're still going to have to do all this sales and talk to people and all those things. But at least it can, if you have 3 ideas, you might as well create 3 different ads and create 3 different wait lists and see which one has the most signups before you start putting in all the effort around sales. Because it is, whether you're selling the product or raising money for the product, it requires your whole being.
Definitely. One thing took me a while, you get that butterfly feeling in your stomach, that nervousness. Go, John. Sorry. My internet's
Yeah, it's once you're, it's a lot like dating. You know, you get that the nerves, you know, of calling somebody, and it's and it's a natural thing, you know, and I think it's something that some people naturally deal with better. But the reality is sales can be broken down into rules, which I think helps engineers. You can break it down to, for example, don't talk too much, you know, let the customer talk, you know. So for example, hold the phone like this. Maybe sometimes it's just helpful to put the phone up so that time it takes to bring the phone back down to your mouth. I guess now we're on Zoom, so that's not as applicable, but you know, this is a tip I got 20 years ago. Maybe there's, don't speak. That's the express. Again, they're going to leave that meeting not with information as much as emotion. It will. This is a very funny thing. You will remember that me telling you this as you go through your journey. That you're like, wow, that person I talked to, I remember that. Oh, Vid selling. No, I remember. He was a great guy, great product, great, yeah, great system. You know, but I would encourage everybody who's, you know, not already kind of naturally inclined to sales to go get a book on sales. How to Win Friends, Influence People wasn't really a sales book, the Dale Carnegie book, but it's a quick read. These books will kind of give you some of the softer skills, which again, some of you may have naturally, and some of you may struggle with. But it's super important to appreciate that it's an emotional thing, and you need to treat it that way, as opposed to like, you know, just an organizational thing. And that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, sales is something that I think came pretty natural to me, so I enjoy it quite a bit, and even enjoy the rejection process. I don't really think that I learn too much from winning. I feel like I learn from my failures, which, you know, usually that just gives me the insight in terms of how I approach the next customer that I'm going to approach. So that being said, my advice in terms of how to do them, and how to not push anything, because that's the last thing. These people are going to make the decision on their own, is to ask a lot of questions, be incredibly inquisitive, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know. The most ridiculous thing to me when people are selling me is that they know the answer to something that I know the answer to is before I ask them, that they clearly have no clue about. And it's a great, you know, test in terms of, is this actually something that's worth my time? So, yeah, I think it's totally acceptable to come back to people with a new proposition, rather than try to rush somebody across a finish line, you know.
I love that. I got to bounce off, guys, but I just want to echo that. Saying I don't know is one of the most valuable ways that you can actually get a sale done, because it builds trust. I mean, many times your customer is an expert, or somebody that you're trying to raise money from is an expert. And the number one thing that you want to do in sales is build trust. And that's why, like Randy talked about, it's how you leave them feeling after the call or the Zoom call, or saying I don't know is great. It builds trust. And good luck with everything, guys. It's awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I forgot to mention this in my the customer service part I was talking about earlier. Is one of the best customer service things actually is to screw up. So sort of like to say I don't know, not necessarily screw up too bad, but you know, fix it. You actually become more loyal, and you build more trust by having an honest mistake and quickly resolving it to their satisfaction, than just like not having the problem in the first place. They don't know if they just got lucky or you're actually.
To that point, I have, since the COVID, my newest venture is I've been doing concerts again, and I've been live streaming them and actually selling tickets to them. And we're doing major acts. It's going fantastic, but we're doing No FX and Slightly Stupid this past weekend. Had like a huge issue. 600 people couldn't get in the room. They're totally pissed. They missed the beginning of the No FX set. You know, end of the world, blah, blah, blah. We simply made a recording of it, left it on the internet for 48 hours so that they could access it and start it at the time that they they chose, and personally reached out to everybody that was affected by it. And sure enough, out of 600 people that had made complaints, only 20 of them actually wanted refunds. So, I mean, you can imagine how I also could have just said, you know what, let's just give them all refunds and not worry about making the new page and not worry about reaching out. And that would have been another approach. But the establishing hey, I care about your individual experience is incredibly important as you're building a platform that scales.
I think this is all tied into also to what Josh keeps telling everybody to just launch, because again, this isn't a product discussion, but there is no better way to build your product than to start selling it and getting customer feedback, good, whatever it is, you'd rather know. There's no worse mistake an entrepreneur can make is to try and develop something in a vacuum.
Yeah.
That's the easy, very clear in your own head, and talk to your co-founders about what a great idea it is. And it's just this very comfortable, reassuring thing. And then it's very scary to put yourself out there and your idea and say, here's the idea. And we tend to want to over-engineer it, over-design it, because we just don't want that rejection of putting it out there. But that rejection is actually super important, because I can promise you all of your ideas in their current form will change. Some of them are probably bad and they will be completely changed. Some of them are okay and they'll change a little, but they're all, I can promise you, nobody idea will go out and the final product that consumers are paying for will be exactly what you have right now. It never is. As Josh says, they didn't start with hosting, they started with web page design, and our story with Gerbo started making iPhone games and we ended up as an ad network. It's just kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, I think don't get too hung up right on your baby. It's just like if you're doing any kind of solving any problem, you're not expected to I should just get the problem. I should just get the answer, right? You're like, no, I'm going to try things and I'm going to work through it. And then I'm going to come to the answer, whether it's a program or building a deck or whatever, you're not going to be so same thing is what's my business, or how does my business work, or what should I charge, is don't hold your first version very tightly. And also tied to speed, the other thing I forgot to mention, customer service, is I think fast customer service is better than good. You got to choose between cheap, good, and fast. When it comes to customer service, a quick, terrible response is actually better than a perfect response. 24 hours is not too bad, but 2 or 3 or 4 or a week later, it's probably the problem's gone. They already left. It doesn't matter, right? The quick response actually builds trust that okay, this guy was an idiot, but I know someone's there and listening, and I'm going to respond back and I'm going to say, no, you're not understanding me. I couldn't hear the first set of no effects. So what are we going to do about it? And then you have the confidence that they're going to respond and you've got something going, as opposed to if they sent you a message and then it was 3 days later, they got a thing saying, okay, we've uploaded the video and if you want, you can get a refund and we'll be calling you next week. It's okay, that's a great response if it had happened in 5 minutes. I don't know. I don't care.
And to that point, I mean, we didn't have the solution figured out right away. As the pissed off people were coming in, we replied immediately with, hey, we're aware of the problem. We're working to fix it and we'll update you as soon as we know, right? People want to know that you are paying attention to them. That I think is
it's more status updates, because maybe they have a boss or they just need to plan. It's not that big a deal, but it's worse to be in the dark than to just know what the catastrophe is.
That's interesting. You mentioned that they have a boss, because I think that's another thing that you need to, when you kind of go down the rules of sales, which again, you can get a book on it. All the books are pretty much every sales book's okay. I mean, you can go to Amazon and just search sales book and buy one. But you need to get to their goals are. And a lot of times somebody is doing something for their boss and their biggest concern is looking bad to their boss, it's just, it's not so much that they care exactly if your product's the best, but they have a goal that's not necessarily to execute perfectly. It's to keep their job and you got, it's all different for different people. So you need to kind of get to what's the root of what's going to help you sell. So for Media Defender, it was very much selling an anti-piracy service to mid-level executives, still real people at music and movie studios, but they were giving these reports to the freaking head of Universal Music, the head of Universal Studios, direct up reports. And so it was super, super important that because their bosses felt very comfortable dropping shit on them at midnight on a Saturday. So they felt they needed to feel very comfortable that they could drop shit on us midnight on a Saturday, and that we could get them the answer, and then they could get their boss the answer. That was a huge part of it.
Yep. Speed and everything. Customer service, launching, whatever. Compounding your money. Let's see. We have a question here from Andrea. It's sort of, how do you guys negotiate money? I don't know, success and free trials in terms of sales. I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to get at here.
Well, free trials is a huge part of so I think the biggest thing for a sale is to have as little frictions, give the person buying as little homework as possible, right? If you're like, oh, I got a sale to make, I got a sale. Here's what you got to do. You got to integrate this SDK in your app to start the conversation. They're like, oh man, you seriously? It's, like you're going to give me homework? If you can give them something that involves very little for them to do, and they can just start experiencing the benefits for free, that's a great way to start. I would really encourage, in different businesses, this worked very well for my businesses, and obviously this doesn't work for every business, but if you can start with a free trial that involves very little work on the customer's behalf, you've increased your odds of sale tremendously.
Yeah, I think you give your free trials out to there's kind of two phases, right? First, you're developing a product, in which case you give it to everybody for free because you need insight. You're not going to figure out how to do it on your own. And then after you've figured out, okay, people are using this thing, there are a certain number of those people that have given enough advice and feedback that has been so valuable to your product development process that you never charge, and you will always keep them for free. But on the move forward and that growth strategy phase, I think you focus on the power user. Who's going to be, if it's a B2B play, what's the major corporation that if I close them, every small company would say, oh, well, Salesforce uses them, like, no question, right? Similar on the consumer side, I do a lot with celebrities, and, using a celebrity very much makes the average person want to do the same thing. So I think that's kind of the way to go about it. And I've always, and before I used to think about how do I go and make a sale that's like a bucket of users, like I don't want to just figure out a way to get one at a time, but I want to go grab a bunch at once. And I think that it took me a long time to realize that the best way to do that is to sell one individual that is very influential on the rest of the community. So hopefully you guys can now know that faster.
Excellent. Thank you.
Nice. Well, maybe we should just go ahead and break out, the three of us. I'm going to put us in breakout rooms and let people just more one-on many or one-on-one-ish type thing. But thank you very much, John, for coming in, and other John for not as much thanks, but didn't stay quite as long. And Randy, of course. And yeah, these guys definitely know their stuff the best of anyone in the world. You guys are so lucky to have them. All right, I'm gonna break you out, and yeah, you can stay as long as you want, but you don't have to stay past 2:30, or you can leave immediately, whatever's good. Thanks again. Good to see ya. Opening the rooms. Let's see what happens. Boom. Here we go. Is it working? Assign. Am I in one? I assigned myself? I did, huh? Nicely done, me.
I'm going to duck out now.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot, Lori. Sorry about the technical issue.
No problem. We'll see you at the meeting later.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're busy.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, I was a little late there. I might need to.
I'm trying to assign you to me, and now I'm going to jump into me. Howdy.